Hi, I'm Nick Holzherr, the founder and head of product for Whisk at Samsung Next.
I'm Travis Bogard, the head of product at Samsung Next.
Whisk is a smart food platform that helps users go from inspiration to action. Inspiration being finding a recipe, and action being creating a meal that you're eating at the table. Whisk was acquired by Samsung Next in March 2019, which brought a whole bunch of unique challenges. One of those was, how do we scale the organization by 4x in a matter of a year? The talent we initially looked for was highly specialized, so Scala engineers, machine learning engineers, and at the start we did put them up on job ad boards across our local city, but really found that we didn't find the right people. When using more traditional recruiting methods, it could often take us between 1 and 3 months to find someone right for the role, sometimes much longer, especially with some of the more specialized roles. Upwork helped us hire better talent than we would have been able to hire ourselves.
At Samsung Next, we're leveraging independent talent in virtually every aspect of what we do, from development and the core product coding that we want to do, to design, to marketing, to the business infrastructure. To me, the real differentiations are about the quality of talent that you're able to tap into, really accessing skilled and unique talent from anywhere in the globe. When you're tapping into a broader set of talent, you often can tap into different time zones, different geographies, and even different lifestyles. And that brings in a whole new lens of the way to work, the way to think, and how to approach a problem. Independent talent has allowed us to really rethink the way we approach going after a lot of business opportunities. The act of getting started really affects what you go after. The ability to go very fast in terms of pulling a team together and bringing in skilled talent really opens up a broader set of opportunities you can go explore and try very quickly. We can also think about team structures that really bring in kind of architects in one type of role and then augments them with other people who can plug into that with a very clear set of deliverables to go behind that. And that really expands the amount of work you can do and the amount of product surface area you can do in a very short period of time.
As a startup founder, I've watched other startups not use independent talent, funded often better than we're funded, and ultimately we have won where they have failed. And I do think that's a big part of that is down to the way that we have used independent talent and have used people from around the world to help us scale our business.
The approach to leverage independent talent is really one of thinking about what's the work to be done and the skills needed. Almost all roles are possible opportunities for leveraging independent talent. And if you think about that, you can really tap into a lot of great talent and a lot of flexibility to scale and grow your teams quickly.
Thank you. That was a great video, and what great examples of how to leverage independent talent. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to engage a little bit in a conversation with both of you, Travis, Nick, and I want to ask a question. It'll be for both of you just to get this going. So what is a high-value, specialized project that you've engaged an independent professional to support, and what was the benefit of doing that? I want to start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I think ultimately we use independent talent for almost any type of project. So it's not really limited to just one type. A very specific example, which I think is interesting, was in our data team. We wanted to build out a food data ontology. So that required someone who really understood food detail really, really well, understood how to build ontologies, and ideally was able to understand how software worked and had an interest in it. Within a matter of a week or two, we managed to find someone who'd worked at one of the biggest CPG brands in the world, had deep expertise in ontologies, in food data, was learning to program. That kind of level of expertise, pinpointing that in the world, is really a unique benefit of using independent talent, where you can search a global workforce.
Absolutely. And I think about it this way. You have this ability to kind of liberate yourself from the zip codes where your offices are in that paradigm. Where's some of the most surprising places in the world you've found specialized talent for your projects?
Well, I think one of the kind of unique parts about how we're set up is actually how distributed we are. We have people in Korea, in Serbia, in Russia, in the US, in South America. I would say there's probably almost every part of the world. An area where I would say we've centered in on and had a lot of success in has been in Serbia and Russia, but it really isn't limited to those two places.
Got it. Travis, I want to put the same question to you. What's a high value, very specialized project where you engaged independent talent? What was the benefit of doing that?
Well, as Nick said, it's really almost hard to distinguish now from where we sit because almost every project is now engaged in some way with independent talent. A lot of it has been, some examples beyond Whisk have been areas where we wanted to get very quickly into some aspect of web development or with Samsung products, there's the Tizen platform, which is a form of HTML5, but also has some specialized aspects. So we've really used that as a way to tap into talent who had experience with those platforms, and even diving into the sales side. How do you do data cleanup on outreach you want to go make around a lead list that your salespeople are going to go call on? Each of those aspects are ways that we've started to take the model that really Nick and the Whisk team had perfected as the core of their business and really applied it into every project that we're going after.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. Let's stay with you here, Travis. Whisk, obviously they brought a variety of innovations into Samsung Next, which is your charter, obviously with the division,
Yep.
which I'm going to ask you about. So let me put this question to you. How has Whisk's hybrid approach to engaging talent changed, transformed how Samsung Next builds and scales their distributed teams?
Absolutely. So, I've had the benefit of living between these two worlds of being a very office culture world and, being based in Silicon Valley where, the prototypical startup garage, everyone comes together and we're all in one place, but also starting to see how other companies were sort of spread out from the beginning. And I started noticing a lot of my friends, even in the Bay Area, were starting their companies and no one was together anymore. And they did that for a variety of reasons: access to talent, the cost structure. And when I joined and started to build this team at Samsung Next, I really had this idea of how do we bring that best of both worlds of the startup speed and way companies go and move fast, with also the ability to bring scale. And so from that perspective, what we did with Whisk when Nick and I started talking was a lot of what fascinated me with that, what they had built was they'd not only gotten it as a way to start, but also as a way to scale and grow. And so what I've been doing as we have brought Whisk in has been bringing that methodology into the other teams, which just takes a bit of time. There's a lot of bias that goes into the way we've done things in the past is therefore the way we continue to do it, where we think that time zones are going to be a big issue, or the language, getting over the cultural differences. A lot of these things, is the talent as good? And what I started to find in working with Nick and the Whisk team was the answer to all those was no, those are not challenges. In fact, the likelihood that you're going to get the top 1% in the Bay Area is highly unlikely. But when you think about the globe as your opportunity and what Whisk had achieved, they were able to really tap into some of the best talent in the world by thinking beyond the zip code, as you said.
I think there's the same kind of situation when looking at a company as a founder for who might go and acquire you. It's actually, I found it really unique to find a team like Travis's and Samsung Next's team who embraced the distributed model and was happy to go through with an acquisition, despite the fact we didn't have everyone stuck in an office where they could come along and do a presentation and meet everyone in one go. So it's kind of like a unique kind of match there, which I found fascinating throughout the whole process.
I have to follow up with you on this then, Nick. When was the moment during this, acquisition, integration, onboarding period, when was that moment when you knew that you were home? In other words, you'd really found a good fit for where Whisk would go next. Get the pun.
I think I saw signals that it was a good fit right from the start with engaging with the Samsung Next M&A team. But actually, as we got further and further through the process, I think as a founder, you're always worried. Like, are they promising these things? But when it gets to it, they're going to offer you something totally different. Actually, that wasn't the case at all. I was, super surprised by the things the M&A integration team did, sending, welcome boxes to all of the team, not just full-time, employees that sat in the US, but actually the whole distributed team, and really putting a lot of thought into how do they integrate a team like ours. So I would say, a very, very positive experience of being acquired with a distributed team.
I myself have been on the acquisition end a couple of times in my career. Once it wasn't so great. The others, it was great. And it all came down, honestly, your answer is perfect, Nick. It's that first 90 days. There's a lot of little signals about the authenticity of everything that's been put forward. And it's just the little things that makes a difference. I'm going to stick with you for the next question here. How has COVID impacted your business? And the second part of the question is, how has independent talent helped you maintain business continuity through the challenging times?
Yeah, so kind of two answers to that question. I think first
Sure.
in the explosion of home cooking, and secondly in the total disruption of how people work around the world. So in terms of the growth of home cooking, it's, looking at any survey online, you'll find stats like 54% of people say they cook now more than they did before COVID. That was a New York Times survey. Our own data showed very much the same story. In the 7 weeks post-COVID impacts of the shutdowns in the US and Europe, we had 7 straight weeks of growth. We got a real hockey stick growth there. We saw a 5 times increase in the propensity of people to save recipes. Shopping lists grew 33%. From an average of 15 items to 20 items. It's real kind of like, not small percentage points or small blips on a graph, but like total changes. I think in terms of, that's obviously a bigger opportunity to go after, which is fantastic. The work obviously also changed. The sort of second part of your question. First of all, it's not only part of your team that's distributed, suddenly everybody. Client meetings are often sign-off moments in the conversations as you progress in the sales process. Suddenly those are postponed indefinitely. Our visits, as a global distributed company in Samsung as a whole company, often we visit US offices, European offices, Korean offices. Suddenly all of those are postponed. I think it's, yes, looking at what was the impact, some parts did slow down, obviously, but actually some parts also sped up. I think you no longer have to wait for that visit to an office. We held client now where previously we may have to wait 2 months to get everyone's diaries, calendars to perfectly align and organize all the travel for a team to go and visit a client or to visit another office. You no longer have to wait for that. You can do it tomorrow or next week. And really, I would say on the whole, the progress of our team we've been able to make has increased in velocity as we have fully embraced the distributed model.
Yeah, same here. We've really enjoyed an increase of productivity and a decrease time on planes and time in traffic. And I also have to tell you, I'm certainly part of that consumer segment you mentioned. A lot more cooking at this house. In fact, I've enjoyed our family learning how to do sous vide and scratch brioche buns from home. So it's been great. But anyway, good stuff. Thank you for that answer. I want to go over to you now, Nick. I'm sorry, Travis, I want to go to you next. Samsung Next is the software and innovation division of Samsung North America. Talk about why and how it was created. I'm always interested in divisions like this.
Yeah, a lot of why Samsung Next exists is to really, help bring about, and we're part of, the broader engine of Samsung, bringing about software services transformation. And what you started to see happen in the world was that a lot of the innovation and the creation that was happening in the late 90s, early 2000s was really coming out after these small teams that were building big ideas with pretty small teams. And so the idea was, how could we bring the relationship with that community in all of its different forms? So sitting within Samsung Next exists a venture team, M&A team, partnerships, and then I run the product team. So each of those functions usually have not sat under one roof. Often there's corporate ventures groups or M&A, and they're often very separate. And our idea was, how do we actually have them all tied together to help in bridging and driving that transformation to software services in combination with the amazing hardware footprint that Samsung has. And so that's really been the mission over the past 7-8 years of Samsung Next, and what we're working on every day.
It's a great model. Bringing it all together. The old model, honestly, Travis, was they would skunkworks a division like this out. When I worked at Southwestern Mobile back in the 80s, we were literally 2 plane rides away from Southwestern Bell proper. I really felt like those guys wanted to kill us. Innovation certainly at Samsung is championed. You are obviously moving quickly to digital maturity, so I believe that your division's a big part of that. Let's go back to you, Nick. I always like to think about using constraints to unleash creativity and possibility. So when I think a lot about how we make the decision that, especially in tech, that this work must be done by core FTEs versus this work can be done by on-demand professionals, I'm just curious, what criteria do you use when you make that determination about what has to be done in the core versus what could be done out in that periphery of on-demand specialized talent?
I think there are very few limits to what can be done with a distributed workforce, if I'm being 100% honest from my point of view. I think there is, obviously some roles have legal constraints where you do need to hire an FTE as under US law. But I do think that everything can be done in a distributed way. I think the outside of the legal constraints, you're seeing some of the largest companies in the world announcing that they don't require their workforce due to COVID to come back until June 2021, or sometimes even further away, or indefinitely. So I don't think there really is. I don't think there are real constraints other than some of the legal ones that do exist, and all of us obviously have to adhere by.
Yeah, I would add something to that, which is I think a lot of the thinking in the past around what needs to be full-time, I think is kind of old thinking. When you think about how do you really want to drive your employee base, even for the full-time people, it's very much outcome based, right? It's really more about what am I trying to get done, not how much time are you sitting in the office, but what is the ultimate output that you're trying to get. When you distill projects down and work down in that way, you start to realize that independent work is the same as the full-time. And one might argue that there's an institutional knowledge aspect, but if you look in the Bay Area, where the average tenure is about 18 months, you're not really talking about that much difference. You still have to rely on documenting and having good ways to hand things off. And when you're working in a smaller sprint-based model, where you're trying to release every couple weeks, every 3 weeks, that long-term matters a little less than the what am I trying to get done in the next few weeks.
And it also creates, it also creates a level of discipline that's required to actually run a distributed team that's extremely healthy for a non-distributed team as well. As Travis said, documenting, making sure that things are really well defined, making sure you're very clear with people what the output should be, not what the number of hours that you should sit at a desk are. These things are kind of seem obvious when you actually write down a list of how do you create constraints, or what are the best practices for distributed work. A lot of the things you write down, you're like, well, they're all the things that I kind of need for a non-distributed workforce as well. But the limitations, or it kind of forces you to really be very, very deliberate about them. And I think all of the processes you end up implementing across your business become better.
I think that the two of you, and we're at the end of this session, the two of you have brought up really important points to conclude on. First of all, I want to say, Nick, you make a great point. The things we learn in managing distributed teams actually benefits everyone else. And if there's one thing we could take away from that, it's this. Managers, stop being attendance takers and politics makers. Judge your people by what they do and measure and become clear about the outcomes, and everyone benefits, whether you're FTE distributed. So Nick, that's a brilliant point. Travis, in your last answer, you also made a brilliant point, amongst many, that this way of thinking everything feels like FTE is old school thinking, like when we say we have to be in the office sitting across the table to collaborate. That's also old thinking. The two of you have done a great job at shattering old thinking. It makes sense to me why you lead the software and innovation charge at Samsung Next. For you, Whisk is certainly infusing a lot of value, creativity, and the two of you have been great to have on. I want to thank you both for your partnership with Upwork and your generosity of time.